month or two ago, I reviewed bizarre Victorian fashion items that I found on museum websites. Well, you all seemed to like that video so much, and I actually had a lot of fun making it, that I decided I would do a part 2 for you all. Just a reminder that I still have the Instagram page Bizarre Historical Fashion, which is where I post a lot of these items up regularly. So first things first is these amazing, I call them jester slippers, because the little dangly bits really feel like a jester's hat to me. Honestly, I find these so cute that I would probably own and wear them myself, if I'm being completely frank. I also really like the tassel bits that are on the end of them, because as if the weird curves weren't enough, they also had to add some tassels for extra effect. These are from circa 1892, so they're kind of towards the turn of the century. And apparently this is a cut called Juliet, and it has a high front and a low V at the sides. And this was actually quite a popular design that was introduced in the early 1890s. It was considered to be one of the standard cuts for slippers by the turn of the century. And I can kind of understand why, they're pretty poppin'. Even the Met says that this early example in Red Kid features long curving points which have been exaggerated to a comical extent, and I would certainly find these to be comical as well. Any shoemakers out there, could you please recreate these, because that would be amazing. This next item I really love a lot. It's an 1885 to 89 dolman, which is sort of one of the options for coats that people had kind of in the 1870s and 80s. I call this thing the pasta dolman, but I also kind of think it looks like Chewbacca. Let me know in the comments down below what you think this thing looks like, because the fringe things on it that look like hair or like weird mats of fur are definitely extremely comical. And I just can only imagine this woman walking around with this thing on and all the little bits dangling, and it's just so funny to me. During this time, not only were the sort of normal wear garments very ornate for the upper class, but the outerwear garments were as well. So things like coats and capes and dolmans all had extremely ornate embellishment if you were wealthy enough to afford it. Outer garments at this time too were not only seen as opportunities for practical application because they would keep you warm in, say, a rainstorm or a snowstorm, but they were also the perfect opportunity for stylistic expression. I'm not really sure what this person's trying to express with this dolman, but it definitely is funny. I find this specimen to be super fascinating. It is a leather corset from 1870 to 89, so it's not really a period that you'd expect corsets to be made of leather. And yet we have an example here, and since it exists in a museum, there's a good chance that there's even more of them that existed during the time period, because we have a very limited view into what actually existed. This is a French corset, and there's always this running joke about how the French were ahead of their time with historical fashion. I don't really know in what applications this corset would have been worn, whether it would have been for daily wear, or maybe perhaps something like fetish wear, or even for performances or something. But it certainly is interesting, and I think the thing that tops the whole thing off for me is the fact that it has these scallops on the edges. There's just something so ornate and intricate about it. I wonder whether it would be warm in the winter as well, because it's leather. I absolutely adore these evening boots. I think they were probably one of the most beautiful pairs of shoes I've ever seen in my life. Just the embroidery on them alone is absolutely gorgeous, but they did make it into this weird Victorian fashion list because they're kind of odd. Even just the fact that there is embroidery on the heels of the boots is strange, and then the fact that they're evening boots instead of the more common styles of slippers or strap shoes is also kind of bizarre for the time period. You would sometimes see evening boots amongst the upper class, but it wasn't really the go-to. So I feel like probably this person had kind of a unique sense of style and they wanted to make an extra statement when they went out to some party. I'm a really big fan of this geometric style embroidery that you seem to see quite a bit of in the late 1800s, and there are just so many things to love about these boots, honestly. From the lacing on the sides to even just the shape of them, of course the excessive amounts of embroidery. You can just tell that these are an incredible work of art, and they probably fetched a pretty penny back in their day. I love what the Met here has to say about them, which is kind of what I inferred. Those daring to wear something already outside of the ordinary often opted as well for unconventionally bold and unusual materials and trimmings. And that's exactly the sense I get with these boots. It's like, I already decided to wear evening boots to a party, so why don't I get them heavily embellished with weird geometric trimmings? If I ever get into historical shoemaking, I I'm definitely going to make some pairs where I embroider the heels. I'm kind of worried though about saying that now on the internet because I really don't need a reason to pick up another hobby. Before we go any further, I'd like to speak about the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. I've actually been using NordVPN now for over 3 years, so when they reached out to do a sponsorship, I just immediately thought it was a no-brainer since I already love their product. There are two primary reasons why I've personally used NordVPN for years now. First of all, sometimes when you're conducting historical research, you can come across some questionable websites. By protecting your IP address, Nord helps to keep your information private and secure. And cybersecurity is probably one of the most important things to me, so I really appreciate this. Now, NordVPN also has an advanced anti-malware feature. It uses threat protection to block intrusive ads and also web trackers to help make your online searching experience even smoother and even more secure. And personally, it just gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that my information is being kept private. The other thing I actually use NordVPN the most for is to watch shows whilst I'm sewing. I live in the UK, and even though I love living here, it does make it really difficult to access any shows that are outside of the United Kingdom. That means I can't access anything on US streaming services unless I have some sort of workaround. That's where NordVPN comes into play for me. All I have to do is select a location on the map, and then within seconds, I'm connected to an American streaming service. With really long hours of hand sewing, you end up going through a lot of shows. That's where having the VPN really helped out because suddenly I had an entire new pool of shows to watch that were just right there and available for me. If you'd like to get 4 months for free on a 2-year plan with NordVPN, be sure to use the unique link down below, which is nordvpn.com/vbirchwood, and use code vbirchwood at checkout. Best of all, it's also risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks so much to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now back to examining some weird Victorian fashion. So I call these pretty things Victorian cowboy boots because that is exactly what they make me think of. They're from 1899, but I really think they look like as if a cowboy boot and a Victorian boot had a baby. It's because of that swirling design that's on it to make it all ornate and decorative. Interestingly enough, they're also quite similar to a style of shoe that was worn by my people, the Tatars, back in the 19th century as well. I just figured the cowboy boots reference was a bit less niche, but any Tatars out there, if you've ever seen those historical 19th century Tatar shoes, you'll know what I'm talking about. I have this tendency to make really obscure references that pretty much no one knows what I'm talking about, but I find them to be absolutely hilarious, so I'm probably going to keep making them. I have a real soft spot for this vest. So my father is an old hippie, and I really feel like this is a very trippy vest that belongs in a Grateful Dead concert, except it's from 1845 to 59, so it's like way ahead of its time. During this period of menswear, coats were often left open, so you'd be able to see the vests that were underneath them. And I think that's part of why they made them so ornate, is because they could and people would actually see what was happening. But this one kind of just takes the whole ornate business to another level. There is so much going on in this waistcoat, I don't even really know where to begin, and I believe it's all hand embroidered as well because of the time period. That would kind of give it away. The motifs on these vests could also be quite symbolic. So for example, these ones have cornucopias, and it says here on the Met website that it symbolizes abundance and fulfillment. So not only were people wearing these as ornate and decorative designs, they may have also meant something to them more emotionally or metaphorically, which I think just adds a really sweet touch to this vest, and it's sort of what you weren't expecting. It almost has a story of its own. This is one of my favorite bustle dresses at the moment. You may have seen it in a prior video where I showed some elements of it. One of the aspects that I find the most intriguing about it is not only its slightly asymmetrical overskirt draping, but it's actually the lace-ups that go up the front. They remind me of those hiking boots, you know, with the laces that are already pre-done, then you sort of just put them through the little hooks and wrap them around. Does anyone know what I mean? That is exactly what this reminds me of, except done like way more elegantly. I just really, really love this bodice, and I feel like maybe it would be suitable as well for a changing body because you could perhaps just lace it a bit tighter or looser in the front depending on what your body needs. And I love the little final touch in the back of where they just have those few panels of the moire silk that sort of glistens with its watermarks in the light. I just think it's a really elegant bustle gown all around, and it's from about 1887, so it's not a massive bustle already by that point, but it still has quite a sizable poof in the back. Nothing like the Tea Party bustle that I've shown a few times in these videos. I had to check the date on these carriage boots a few times because they look like a very modern pair of shoes that you could get at a shoe store today. These are from 1870 to 1890, and if you don't know what carriage boots are, they're essentially footwear that was worn during carriage rides to help keep your feet warm. It's really kind of the epitome of upper class fashion because Firstly, you had to be able to afford to ride in a carriage, which is already a big privilege at that time. But on top of that, you'd have footwear specifically made to keep your feet warm during the carriage ride. Also, carriage boots would have been worn over your more delicate evening shoes, or shoes that maybe wouldn't have kept your feet as warm and toasty during a carriage ride, because they didn't have central heating in carriages like we do today in cars, obviously. One thing I really love about these is actually the pattern on them. I really love this sort of floral design. They look like little snowdrops. As an aside, snowdrops are one of my favorite flowers, so whenever I see the motif used in fashion or in any type of jewelry or embroidery, I already have a biased soft spot for them. Kind of keeping with that cold weather garments theme, this is a very toasty looking cape from 1873. There's a lot going on with this cape, but I'm personally a massive lover of strange historical knitted garments, so this is kind of something I would like to wear one day and have remade. I'm actually not great at knitting, so I probably couldn't do it myself, but just to even commission someone to knit something really wacky like this could be really fun. There's a lot going on with this cape, but one of the things I think really appeals to me is how the fringe starts out as being purple and then eventually just turns into these cream-looking little circles that look like beads, as if all the little tiny cream pom-poms all over the garment already weren't enough. They also then had to add beads to every single one of the little tassels at the bottom. This garment, though, would not have been easy to make. It would have been extremely time-consuming to create, and it shows true knitting and craftsmanship at the time. It also looks like there's a little hood too in the back, which is just an added bonus. Some garments you find are weird because of their decoration, others are weird because of their patterns or prints. This garment is weird because I just can't really figure out how it works. It's a corset from 1830 to 49, so it's potentially not Victorian, but it still falls some of the years within the Victorian era, so I decided to include it in this Victorian specific video. It looks like some sort of wraparound corset, so it looks like it maybe would have buttoned and then wrapped all the way around and then gone somehow through the little slits. I'm sure someone has remade this garment, but laid out like this in the museum photo, it just looks incredibly strange and kind of weird. I bet though it was probably extremely comfortable. It looks like a pretty comfortable corset. If anyone has any more information on this thing, please let me know in the comments down below, because I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts or if you know of anybody that's recreated it. And the last weird garment in this video is this circa 1860s lounge suit, which is alternating between bright red and gold stripes. And it's just a little bit out there, so it's not unusual to see some pretty unique patterns and fabrics with lounge suits, especially during this period for menswear, but this kind of just takes it to a whole different level. I'd imagine the person wearing this probably had a very eccentric taste in fashion, and upon closer inspection, it looks like it's lined with a green silk, which only makes this garment even more strange. I also love how the covered buttons are alternating with the patterns of the fabric to basically match exactly how the stripes go. So you can see here, like, one of them is the gold stripe and the other one is covered with the red fabric. And I just think that's a really special touch. You can tell they paid close attention to detail when making this garment. I hope you enjoyed watching this video where I react to even more bizarre Victorian fashion items that I found in museum websites. There might be a part 3 of this video at some point if you all really want to see one, probably not 2 months from now, but at some point in the future. If you haven't seen part 1, then I definitely recommend you watch that one because there were a lot of fun items in that video. A big thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video, and a big thanks to you for watching it. I'll see you all next week for another video.